Good morning, good evening, good day to this webinar on approaches to coding. For this webinar, I actually have prepared something new. And the main topics, I'll start out with why do we need to talk about coding approaches, how to set up a coding system, and I will point out some common pitfalls. And then the question on bottom-up or top-down coding, and I show basically both ways. And what I'm doing differently in this webinar now is kind of tying it to methodological approaches. So it's not so much about mouse clicks. The mouse clicks are all explained in the book, and I also have video tutorials on it. So after this session, you will get the link to the presentation I'm going to use, and then I'm also sending you the link to the video tutorials on the mouse clicks, basically, on how to develop subcodes and category codes. Because I'm pretty sure that we don't have time in this 1 hour that I also go over that. Of course, if you have a few minutes in the end, I can go live and show you that in ATLAS.ti. So then let's start this up presentation. I watch the screen from what you can see and to see how quickly it's updating. So I'm actually not talking ahead of you. If there's any issue about not seeing something, or my voice is not following properly the image, then please do let me know. So this presentation is on approaches to coding, and of course prepared by me, so can move on. So why do we need to, why do I want to talk about it? Is because I want to avoid that you go back to Excel and continue to analyze your data there. Because the software is not basically telling you what is a high-level code or what is a subcode and how to develop a concept or how to develop a category. Atlas and all other programs of that genre just offer this thing that is called a code. And on a methodological level, we then have to give it meaning. And if we don't manage to do that within the software, then people kind of default to what they know best, either Word or going back to Excel. So this actually is a project I kind of caught in the middle, and this person was able to print out like huge Excel sheets. So this is about 2 by 3 meters or something laying on the floor. And what you have here are basically what should be codes in Atlas, and these are all the cases. And what she has done is she went back through her Word documents and copied only the good quotes in here. So it's not all the data. It actually cannot manage all of that. That's why we do have Atlas, and also analytical function to go beyond just coding. So that's one reason why we should talk about how to set up a coding system. What you see here now is the coding system of my own dissertation, and that was 1999. So you live and learn. So in 1999, I have been working with software for about 7 years. Well, I started still with DOS, but soon there were Windows. So we didn't have all the functionality that we have now. So codes were black. We still had to work with ASCII text, no PDF. I mean, there was audio and video and images, but it was ASCII text we needed to work with hard line breaks. So that might also explain, coding differently than back then than I do it today. But it's also a process of learning, which I actually then summarized in teaching and later on writing the book. What I've circled here are what I call monster codes. So you see the frequency is 157 here, 118, and also that one is 157, I guess just by chance. The second number, just to brush up, is the number of connections with other code. So my dissertation was on addictive buying in extreme case on impulse shopping. So here you see that by the codes. So how would I do that today? I mean, this is just 160 something codes. There's no structure, no order in it. I kind of, find my way around these codes and all these quotations, but for a third person would be quite difficult to do. And that, as I will also show later, you will also take away some analytic options if you code like that. So what you see here is I've taken apart the definition of impulse buying. I mean, I didn't recode the data, but that's why it's all zeros. But this is how I would code today, and even the code names then might look differently, because once you start structuring and organizing code, things are happening again analytically, and you might then just continue to work with that. So there were some financial aspects in there, there were some psychological aspects in there, and some theoretical aspects. So these were derived from some theory, what I've read in the literature, how they defined impulse buying. Yeah, so we immediately see from that coding we have financial, psychological, and some theoretical aspect, but they might also turn into something different if you work some more with that. So as we don't have like this tree structure in ATLAS, we have to prefix. So it's not my invention. Well, I came up with it at some point, but then we had email discussions lists, no forums. But then if somebody asks how do you structure a code list from all corners of the world, people had this additional value prefix in ATLAS. So everybody who's working with ATLAS for a prolonged period of time get the idea of prefixing to sort and structure your code list. So what you see on the next slide is a list that already looks sorted and structured. It has prefixes, and it looks kind of neater than what we had before, and has colors, of course, newer version, but it isn't. When this person showed me the code list, she said, I don't know what I should do with the code core current table. It's of no use to me. And then I looked at the code list and I said, yeah, I know why. Because she has put actually two aspects in, but within one code name. So I kind of try to mark this here. You see, it's whatever is in color. There's some duplication or multiplication of structure, simplicity, planning occurs also a couple of times. We have lessons learned a couple of times all over. Challenges we have also a few times within the subcode. So as a rule for you to remember is as if you repeat a code label on the sub level, so after you prefix, something is going wrong if it comes up again and again and again, because then you're mixing two layers. So what is the solution? What do you need to do if you code like that? Well, if it's different aspects, if it's actors, if it's actions, if it's attitudes, behaviors, consequences, strategies, you have to put them into different categories. And this is indicated then with prefixes in ATLAS, so to structure your code list in that sense. And then you need to double code. So whatever these, this is actually a codes from a literature review, and that literature review was about models, log linear models. So all of that, what was a prefix was actually models, so I forgot to mention that. So this whole section is about that LM model, this one as well, and this is the AM model. And then we have challenges within that segment, and we have, and this occurs to be on the same segment, the definition and the definition of that AM model, if you would click on here. And then we have another sub segment here, and its purpose within the LM model. So once you kind of restructure your code list, it kind of looks like that. So this is not kind of the final yet, because you see that it still needs some work. So if you know my Children and Happiness project, you also know that everything that's more like a variable, I actually prefix with a hashtag tag and use gray as color and the others are content codes. And these codes we still need to work on. As the model is mentioned again and again and again, because the whole papers are about models. So the frequency is high. Same as if you code focus group data, and you need to code each speaker unit, and that means males and females just come up very often. But you need that later on to relate a particular model with a particular challenge, for example. So now, having taken it apart, you can relate it to each other. If it's all meshed within one code, well, you take away work from the software and you have to do it all manually, and that's what we don't want to do. So the work that still needs to be done here is we still have 55 benefits that are not in the subcodes. We have lessons learned. Now we're not locked in with the models now. We have now all 44 lessons learned. If you now look at that, at the lessons learned, this is all like kind of lumped together, and develop the different types of lesson learned, then we get a completely different view, because we now look at that on a level higher, not within the model, but on all lessons learned across the models, and then we can later relate that again to the model. So there's some different issues analytically happening also when you do that, and you can dig deeper in your data material. Now I show you the function that you then can use. Once it would all be properly coded, there would be also more numbers in this table. So this is a cross-tabulation of codes, a code to co-occurrence table. Now within a few clicks you can see all the benefits across all the models. So you get a good impression which benefits would go with each of the models. And the same with challenges. And next slide shows the challenges. It's coming up now, and from there, and you can actually access the data. It's the updated version a bit different now. You can access the data actually below the table, so it's a bit more convenient. Yeah, but what this slide also shows is that from within the table, it's not just numbers. You can always access the data. So the numbers give you an overview of where the benefits and the focus of the benefits of a particular model are as compared to other ones, and then you can look at the data behind it and have some more thinking about it and write your comments and memos on that. Yeah. So what I want to show with that example is that it really depends on how you build up the coding system, and that you followed certain rules how to build it up in order to utilize the further more advanced analysis tools in ATLAS.ti. We have a practical question now from Sarah. I read it to the others, but I have to move it over so I talk to the microphone. So Sarah is asking, how do you generate a cross-tabulation table in ATLAS.ti? Is there a video tutorial available on this website for this? Well, I can quickly show you, but there are video tutorials as well. I keep this in mind, and I don't want to update this now. And I'm just checking. So this is the example project in a different type of version. What I actually want to now cross-tabulate is the definition of happiness as compared for those who have children or those who don't have children. So these are my variable codes here, similar to the model codes I showed you before. And what I'd like to do actually, in order not to have to select from all the codes, I'm always creating a code family for those codes I'm interested in, and to set it as filter. So the effect that you have is that you then don't have to select from so many codes. So I stopped here at the menu option, so I'm at the analysis option is quite small. And then you have the option code co-occurrence table. The table is actually quite easy to handle. So the table is coming out now. So you see now I have a very short list now of of codes here, and I choose my variable codes, those who have children, those who don't have children, for the columns, and the definition of happiness codes I choose for my rows. So it's actually quite straightforward to run the table. It's under the analysis menu. You select the codes you're interested in, work with the filter as I did, or just select from all codes. Just that list here on the side would be very long. And then if you said, oh, this cell, this is quite interesting, then you can click on it and look at the data and look at the data behind the table. Yeah, you see already from the screen now here, well, I can even make it full. Oh, that was the wrong one, make it full screen. So the bigger the screen is, yeah, the better you can fit everything on it, or also work with 2 screens, so you can have that table actually on your second screen and look up your data here. What we still need to wait for is that print button here within that table. I don't want to talk too much about analysis function here right now, otherwise we're missing out on time, but I hope that has given you a short impression on how this works. Just a little tip: if you want to print it out, you have to run co-occurrences in the query tool for output. Yeah. So this just as a quick side step, but what I have shown exactly now really depends on that you have your coding set up in a particular way, and that's why I'm suggesting certain ways of building up the coding system, always thinking about what you can do with the data afterwards. And this is what I call the computer-assisted NCT method of qualitative data analysis, which works within larger methodological frameworks. And this is what I want to actually show next. So the NCT actually stands for noticing, collecting. That's what we do with coding and think. So we can think about the data that we have coded. So NCT, noticing, collect, think. That's kind of the backbone of how to do it in the software, and the mouse clicks are described in the book, or also for the coding system. I will send you the video tutorials, and then now we can integrate it with different approaches to coding. So let's move back to that presentation. Yes. So from the perspective on that, from that perspective of the NCT method, I don't care which way you start coding. You just have to kind of come to a particular way of developing the coding system in order to utilize the software tools for analysis. So you may start inductively or deductively, or a mixed approach. Oftentimes if we start deductively, we have also some ideas in mind, the codes that we deduct from theory and so on. So often it is a mixture. And also if we start with a deductive approach, oftentimes there will be some codes coming up from the data, and we mix it with some inductive coding. But there are approaches that are more clearly deductive and more clearly inductive. I like Saldana's term of first cycle coding. Oops. And yeah, there's a little wiggle here on it, so those Spanish people. So it's not here in the presentation. So he talks about first and second cycle coding. I would even say there is more than second cycle, third and fourth. I mean, really depending. The more inductive you work, the more cycles you have to go through in order to get your coding system going. So what this table actually shows, this is done by 4 coders in one of the workshops I'm teaching within about 45 minutes exercise. They all at the same time of doing it, but oftentimes they come up with a variety of numbers of codes. So sometimes between 6 and 7, and some people have even 25 codes. They might read a bit faster, but if you really look at the codes, you can see their code on a different level. this code 1 codes something on definition of happiness or experience of unhappiness, reasons for having a child or having a baby. So it's on a more aggregate level. That person, you can also read it in some books called lumpers. Yeah, so lump everything into a broader code. Others code very close to the data. The effects of having children, marital satisfaction goes down, or more joy, or becoming a bit wiser. Which for code 1 actually is effects of parenting. If you look on the left-hand side, and actually can also now I can't really. I'm going to lose my full screen here. Well, I can now. I've done it. So I was pointing out the effects of parenting here, and more joy, becoming a bit wiser, and so on. It's much more on the descriptive level. But this is now very small, so I cannot use these tools if I do it on full screen. So we go back to that, and I have to clean as well. Yeah. So I think now you can see more if I do it like that. Yeah, so you see different lengths of code lists. And that first cycle coding, I mean, if you talk around in theory, could also be the way of open coding your data, which is close to the data. And this is also when people read grounded theory, they come in with more codes if people start deductively, and sometimes also dependent on discipline. Yeah, if I get somebody from, at least in German context, for political science, they're mostly educated in quantitative method, they start more with aggregated codes. Or if somebody has a more quantitative background, quantitative training, they tend to be on the code 1 side, and those coming from even a hermeneutic background, they tend to code more on the descriptive level. But these are extremes, and most people tend to be in the middle. Yeah, so code 2 and 3, they have some abstract codes and some codes that are very descriptive. So we might come from different directions. So depending on who we are, or depending on who we are and our disciplinary background, the way we think, we're all different human beings. But the issue is then, if we work with software, is depending on where we're coming from, what do we need to do within the software? So there's no point in continuing to code very open and close to the data and generating 500-600 codes after 2 interviews. And there's people who code like that. They do have I just check, I have a note from Raphael. Raphael, yes, we did start. I think the others also can hear me and can see something. So if you cannot, maybe I just answer him quickly. So you know that he's actually not missing something here. So I'm back here to this slide. This is when you're on your own, you have to be aware of talking and be aware of participants' needs. So after you code, it always depends on the material, but if you realize after 2 interviews you have 600 codes already, you better do something about that. Otherwise you end up in something that I call the coding swamp. If you have 30 codes after 2 interviews, you're probably more like a lumper, and you have to separate your codes. And you also should do that quite early on, otherwise you end up also with 150 codes, quotations within a code, and then you have to read all these data again if you take it apart. And you have to recode all of these quotations again manually. So that's why I'm suggesting to do that quite early on, when you feel like you have quite a good list of codes, no more ideas are coming, and there's a first saturation of of ideas that you get, and then you then sit with your codes and sort and organize. I'm now not going through these more technical steps because I want to focus on the methodological part and leave it up to the video tutorials for you to work on if you want to go through the mouse clicks and follow the mouse clicks. What you see here is that, you know, we have been here somebody kind of lumping everything together, so you need to read all these 66 quotations, kind of take some notes. You do it on paper, you do it in an Atlas memo. We will see that in the later slide, then how you generate codes from that, and then basically you develop your codes, and it's that slide. And then what you need to do is to go through all 66 quotations again and then distribute it into your subcodes. So that's why I said don't wait until you have 66. So maybe you do that a bit earlier. So then you start developing your first structure here. And after developing it first, you continue coding, and there might be more ideas coming, and then you may already now work with the prefixes here. And there will be more cycles of adding data into the subcodes. Yeah, so that's very briefly on how to go from broad to subcodes, and all of this would be kind of showing you how you go from the descriptive to the conceptual level. And if you on the descriptive level, this is where my code swamp is now coming into the forefront. Yeah, you have to be aware that you don't walk into it. You don't end up in a mess. You have 1,000 codes. And then what often happens if people don't have the advice of what to do next, they leave the software and end up with Excel or back to Word, and that's what I actually want to avoid. Yeah. So you will actually see some of that in action a bit later. What you need to do here is you need to merge. Yeah, maybe I just bring up that to the forefront again. It's coming now. So you have a merge code function, and if you look at the terms now leading, being deeply fulfilled or decided, then everything of that means fulfillment. Meaningful life, purposeful life, richer life, also all of that contribute to fulfillment. So rather than to have it all in codes with very low frequencies, we merge it into more aggregated codes. So the rule you actually can consider is that if you have lots and lots of codes, yeah, and at first you start without prefixing, and the frequency are very low, a lot of 1s and 2s and 3s, then you have to aggregate your codes. It's no point in continuing coding like that. People are very afraid of doing that. So I'm losing something. You don't lose, you gain structure and order and analysis possibilities of your data. You may as well save this AJU under a first cycle coding name. So if you feel nervous about merging, because if you merge, all of these labels disappear. But they should disappear. They are too close to the data. They're not on the conceptual level yet. And if you want to move on, you need to lose these descriptive labels to move to more conceptual labels. Yeah, you may as well save this under different names, so you can always go back to it and see what your ideas were about it, or you also capture in the code comments about it. We'll see also ways of working with the quotation level, which is actually quite unique to Atlas. Only Atlas has that quotation level where you can actually keep that descriptive level, but not in the codes, because you run into problems if you leave it at the code level. Yeah, these are 47 codes on only one aspect, which is the effects of parenting. And if you do this on all aspects of the data, we end up in a mess. And yeah, so as I said, I'm not going through the mouse clicks here because now I soon want to move on to the methodological approaches. So a structured code list looks something like that. Yeah, and then of course you can use colors to separate different categories. And you see, I hardly go more than 2 levels. Yeah, this is all the explanations, and this some of the subcodes, and these are all the happiness and aspects of it, the hard work, but, and some aspects of it. Actually, in a later version, if you look down here at the effects of parenting code that I'm now zooming in, I actually separate it out into actually 2 categories, positive and negative, because you have more flexibility in analysis later on. So even if you have a tree structure in other programs, also there in terms of working with the analysis function, there's no point of making a tree that is 3, 4, 5 or even more levels deep. Sometimes you need 3, but seldom you need 4. If you're already at the 4th level, you actually come into the danger of what I've showed before, that you start multiplying terms. Yeah. And then you can play with colors and prefixes and so on in order to sort and structures. So what I'm often asked for is that that's the one in capital letters for. That's what I use for main category names. As titles. Yeah, sometimes, as you see here with the definition of happiness 1, there's some quotation like miscellaneous and you cannot put in any subcodes. But while you work, these titles also fulfill a function, because you may have, let's zoom into one of these categories. See, wait until you can see something. This explaining, some relations here in the data. These all what you have in the subcodes is all the different explanations towards a particular phenomena here. And so you have already developed some subcodes for this, or some depending on the methodological approach, or whether it's a property, or whether it's a dimension, or whether it's a subtheme, or whatever. And then you continue coding, and now you come across something that's not in your subcodes. Then now you can collect it again in that main code explanation. You can start collecting some ideas that you can't really sort through, and that's the beauty also of computer-assisted analysis. You can kind of just put it aside and think about it later. You don't even immediately have to think about a label. You can just collect it there again. Remember the term noticing and collect. You notice something, it doesn't really fit anywhere yet. Well, but it's an explanation, so let's put it under explanation and think about that later. After we collected some more, then we can review it, think about it, and we notice something again. It might actually fit in one of the subcodes if we give it a slightly different name, maybe a slightly more aggregated one, or we need to develop another subcode. Yeah, so there's some constant movement until we're happy with our code system. So it's not only about first and second cycle, it's a few cycles. You go through new interviews coming, you might already be able to sort some of the data in something existing, but some new ideas are coming, and you continue develop your code system. So having that as a background, I then move on to my first example here of inductive coding. Well, it could actually turn this one into a grounded theory. I'm not sure yet. These are all kind of projects on the go, and it's one of the topics I'm working on is also working with video data. So this is some example here. So I captured some social media data from YouTube. And here you see what the primary document manager looks like. So we have some videos here. It's on flash mob, so it's a price performances that I captured. I captured the comments as well that people wrote on it. And what you see down here is some screen captures I did throughout the analysis to focus on certain aspects of the video. And then there's some PD families or groups, if you in the Mac version, so the locations of people commenting, we have that as well as in some geographical files, the videos, the comments, and maybe there could also be later one on the screen captures I've made. So this is the data, so you get an idea of how this is set up. And this is how it looks coded. So this is a Mamma Mia flash mob in Brazil, so ABBA. And then I now show you how I started to code it. This was basically done by just looking at the data and getting a feeling for it, so very inductively, not looking yet at literature. There is some literature out there, but this was working purely from the data. The research question I posed to this data is, what is the audience reaction? If you want to maybe, make use of flash mobs, it's often used for marketing purposes to kind of make aware of a brand, and if you want to put it to useful use later on. So you could kind of say, we need to really intrigue the audience with our flash mob, and how do we actually do that? So the focus here is on the audience in the videos, and also then on the audience watching the video on YouTube. So I came up with some initial codes here, which I prefix audience at first. Yeah, so once you know that it's a prefixes, you might start, you kind of tend to start doing that, but we will see these are changing. So this is not written in stone. These things are changing over time. And then I looked at the statements, and then I noticed there were some likes, dislikes, people talking about superlatives, critiqued whatever they saw, and provided some explanations for others and so on. So this is these are some deductive, actually, in the sense that, well, I looked at some of the comments and came up with these codes to begin with. So, but it wasn't really reading the data and then developing it from there. It was just getting an overview. So I came up with these codes more in a deductive sense, and these are, you see, already some numbers in here. So I developed while watching the video. So how did I continue? So now then I noticed, well, there's some process in there. And then I started to put 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so some sequence within, yeah, so the whole flash mob starting, then people, and we'll see that, how I labeled it later on, getting into it, being into it, and then kind of the 4, which is kind of falls off here in the image, is kind of the end of the flash mob. And then this is again the next cycle. So you see, this is the gaining structure and structure again. It kind of follows the same patterns with prefixing, but the audience is now, this is all about the audience reaction. So that's also actually one hint. If you have a prefix that comes up 30 or 40 times, it's probably not the right one. Yeah, so you're not on the right category level yet. But it may help you to begin with. Yeah. And in my case, to separate the audience stuff from the statement stuff. And the statements may still also develop into something further if you look at it. But here we get now the warming up phase, and the phase getting into the mood, the phase getting really into the flash mob, and then 4, it's not on there, it's kind of phasing out. And then I started to also work with colors. And I used red for getting into it, and blue because people were also in that phase, but they were not really interesting. So I left them cold. Yeah, so that is what the blue color indicates. That they were in that phase of the flash mob in a sense, but they were not grooving, they were not clapping, they didn't do anything, they were just not interested in what was happening around them. So you can also play a bit with colors and actually what they mean. So I actually used it here, blue for cold, getting slowly into it, warming up, green, and then being heated into it, really dancing with the other people and so on. So there's some meaning here behind the colors, but if you have 12, 20 categories, well, we don't have so many different colors that really show up well. So sometimes you can use colors to indicate what you mean, or having an additional meaning to that. What you also see here is with that little tilde sign behind it, all of these codes are commented and they are explained. So that's also important. And if I look at here, you see it's work in progress. I have 114 watching, 55 recording with their mobile phones. So there's some room for looking into it, and I have 41 clapping. Well, some of the, I don't know that, but if I look at the code like that, this is what I'm actually looking at the frequency. So the messaging might be the recording, using, their smart devices to communicate. So it may actually be turning into some communication code, whatever. But so if you look at your code list, look at the prefixes. If it's like this still, like my statements, they are probably going to change over time. If you have codes that have very high frequencies, also an indication to look at that, to move on to develop your code list even further, to get deeper into your data. And so now to show you what you can do next. These are actually network views when I started now to relate things to each other. Still, this is not the final level. This is still starting to notice things that are interesting. And if you remember my explanation of the color, well, this guy is kind of getting into it, but not really. So we only have one red code. Here we have lots of red codes here, and not even a blue one. So that lady was getting into it very quickly. Yeah. So I called this the man in the white shirt and the lady in green. And the next one actually showed that in review a bit closer. And yeah, so you see that I started to relate things to each other. There are lots of hyperlinks in these type of data. When working with video data, I tend to work a lot more with the quotation manager, renaming, commenting on quotations directly, because there's lots of things happening, and also working with screenshots. If you're interested in that, this is basically the data I'm using for a case for the Sage method platform. So it's going to be online maybe but I'm still working on it, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, where you can message it on via the ATLAS networks and put it on Twitter once it's online. So then I go through the whole study and explain how I do the analysis on that, focusing on how to work with video data. Yeah, what you see here is the nice thing also about the networks is you can access the data behind it. So that's one of the video segments that you can actually also play from here. So to show you that's how I work a lot also here with this video data, with the quotation manager. You see lots of hyperlinking, commenting, renaming of quotations. So you can really, for a descriptive analysis, really utilize the quotation manager, work and rename quotations. Yeah, so these Atlas gives you default names, but you can all rename these quotations and kind of write descriptive labels, and then also comment on it in the comment area of the quotation manager. So you need that for more inductive, also hermeneutic approaches. I will briefly show you phenomenology, where you also will work much more on this level of your data. So this was, I'm staying with inductive approaches for a while, but this was just particularly showing also in relation to particular data as well. And now actually I'm showing you the ground theory data. This is a chapter I'm working on, and if you can read German, you can read it soon. It's on conducting ground theory computer assisted. I might maybe also publish it in English at some point, because it's kind of interesting what's coming out now after started to write. Because after kind of looking at all the discussion on it's nonsense to use computers in terms with context of grounded theory and so on. There are a couple of authors, including Glaser, who think it's nonsense to do that, but Corbin doesn't. Corbin, in her book, she kind of points out that you can actually do it with the computer, and she gives some pointers. And the fourth edition was just actually released. It's the 2015, but at least I just discovered that it was out. And yeah, she gives some nice pointers that you can also do it computer assisted. She does it all manually. And so what I did, I took the data she's using in the book. The full interviews are printed in the appendix of the book. So I'm using the same data, and you see from scanning there's still some errors in here. This is an interview that Amsel Strauss has been doing in 1986 with Vietnam veterans. And on purpose, I skipped her analysis and didn't read it and started to code the data. And even though she's saying that other people might find other things in the data if other people code it, but at some point she also has been saying data don't lie. It's also in one of the books. So if you really listen to what's in the data, and then I did, yeah, it was a bit of an experiment that I did, but I came up with very similar ideas that she did. So she also kind of pulls out the concept in the book that she's coming up with writing memos. I did it right away via coding, but I did also much more writing here than I do with other types of studies. You see some of the codes. You see it's always here at the tilde sign. In case you're not that familiar yet with Atlas. So I zoom in. You see this little wavy thing here at the end, and you also see that the code node has a post-it here. So then the codes are actually commented, or all other objects as well that have a post-it here or this little sign. Yeah. So I started to comment on some codes, but I commented also a lot on quotations. So I didn't use the memo function for this initial descriptive work on the data, because then you also end up in a mess if you do that with memos in Atlas, with Atlas memos, because a memo needs a title, and this is just your thoughts and ideas on the data, and that not necessarily as so abstract yet that you can immediately think about a title to write a memo on it. So whatever it's memo writing in grounded theory, you can utilize actually in different areas of the software. So you see that it's a bit of structure. It's all about war experience, so I started to prefix, but I didn't use color yet, and it is just the first interview. It's also low frequency. I mean, I have little data, but it's kind of starting to analyze the data as soon as they come in. So now you see my quotation manager again, and I did filter on commented quotations to pull them up here. That's why you have the yellow background color. So all of my thoughts, initial thoughts that I had with some of the quotations, I put in the quotation comments. So these are memos in the grounded theory sense, but I utilize the quotation comment feature. I didn't rename quotation here. I just I have extended the default name. Normally it's 30 characters, but you can actually extend it to more. It's only one line, so it doesn't make sense to extend it to 500 characters, but maybe 250 or 200 if you have bigger screens, so you can see more of the quotations. So then you can work with the data, think about some codes, write down your thoughts, and work your way up from there. I did write some memos, but these are some memos on when I thought, oh, this should be actually traumatic experience, and there was something coming up with self-consistency, so I was thinking about Rogers' congruency theory, and starting to write some memos around that, because this is not directly yet related to data, some more theoretical notes that I did put into real Atlas memos. And this is also kind of work in progress yet. So once I move more and more towards the conceptual level, there will be also more memos in the memo manager. So moving from the comment fields actually then to more conceptual memos that you actually give a title. So the more you work on your categories and the relations between. So now the next level of coding pulled up. So then the second and third interview came with actually two different types. So the first person was a nurse or a medic person, and then we had here people actually fighting in combat. So the comparing and contrasting can continue. So we can actually, you can see how is this person experiencing as compared to another one. So if you have the first interview, well, we could compare and contrast within the interview or with some other, thoughts we have, but now we can also compare and contrast within between different types of people and come up with different ideas. And based on that, categories emerge. And it's still no saturation yet. It's only 3 interviews, so this still needs to move on. We need more data, and category development can take place. So grounded theory would call these all concepts, and those concepts on the more abstract level will become categories, and later we on kind of work on our core category. What you see here, another little trick I'm doing, is all those codes that I don't know where they go yet. There's no category yet. They're on the descriptive level. I give them a little asterisk in front of them, and so they pop up at front of the list. Again, you see my variable codes: background family, background professional. They have the hash on there, gray. So kind of some convention I use for myself. The D-link category kind of comes up more and more and more, and that might be like a candidate at some point for a core category. Once you start seeing how you can relate all these things together. There's a lot of time to question on actual coding. Well, if you look at the Strauss-Corbin and also I think the Glaser-Chamas type of way of doing it, it's when you start relating concepts to each other. And Corbin doesn't really actually code as we do in software. She does it all in memos. And the definition she gives in the third edition is we just actually call it axial coding when we start to relate concepts in writing about them in memos. So relating things around their axes, yeah, and then using them, and they call Strauss-Corbin would be then using the coding paradigm. Yeah, so at that level, when you work with your codes, then also more and more the code comment fields will actually fill with content, and then even on the more abstract level, I would move to the memos in Atlas. So here the comment field for the codes I would use for analytical purposes. In my book I write you just use it for code definitions, but here I think it's a good space actually to start thinking about what's all within a particular code, and then, well, once you move, starting to see how things are related, we can move into networking, and you can move into writing these things down in a memo. So axial coding is actually not really a process of, dropping and dragging code or developing other codes. Further, it's actually writing and linking concepts to each other, and the concepts on different levels. Yeah, and here the concepts on different levels, again, here are the capital letters the one with the prefixes. You could call these categories and these properties. And if you walk into dimensions, I'm not sure whether I have a dimension here yet. I think there might be something positive, negative at some point. I don't have yet. So what I started here also, you can see I started to develop the procedural a level here again is something during or after, before, and so on. So the time dimension comes in here as well, so you can see that developing. So I have to get to quick come up here, and yeah, so this is kind of a start of getting going with grounded theory without now having gone the full cycle, but that was, I think, would be a webinar on its own. So very briefly, this is not on my data, but how phenomenology should be a Y, like the Giorgio way of doing it. And there are different and a lot of ways of doing phenomenology these days, and there are certain types of phenomenology which I also would agree on with some other authors that is not meant for computer-assisted analysis. But this form would be interpretive phenomenological analysis would also lend itself to computer-assisted ways of doing it. But van Manen, for example, I would also very likely not do in a computer. This is data from this person, Lisa Whiting. She shows how she has implemented it, and that's some of her data. I go quickly over this here now. She developed her meaningful sentences here, and then the themes arising from these interviews. And in Atlas, you could actually then utilize the quotation name here again to write down your themes. So basically, it's a summary of what's the main thing within each of the quotations here. And then, based on that, she developed the central themes expressed as revelatory of structure, as they call it. And actually, I pulled up here the flyout window for codes, which would kind of give a list of all the kind of main themes she found. But so what I quickly want to point out here is that also for phenomenological study, if you work more on the descriptive level, my advice is to also utilize a quotation manager, and also, as is not shown here, very much the common field as well, to do a lot of your thinking. What does it actually mean? What does the data tell you? How do you experience it? Within the quotation comment fields, and then move to the more abstract level using codes, and then move again to a more abstract level utilizing memos. And just briefly, one other aspect. Oh, it's already 7 o'clock. I hope you can stay on for a few more minutes. Working with survey data. So this is how it looks coded. So we have two open-ended questions here, kind of a summary statement, evaluation of the Minecraft game, computer game. So here's the Excel file that was imported into Atlas, and now it's imported, and you see the PD manager having all the cases here, and Atlas automatically creates all the document families that, of course, you have indicated in the Excel table. So how you can approach coding here? This open-ended question from survey, well, you get it from, maybe from your online tool. You have not done the interviews, you have not transcribed them, it's all new. So in order to get a feeling for the data, I like to use the word cruncher. This is the word cloud of all the data, and zoomed into not all of the words, so you can see here that they at least occur 6 times. And then you can pick up on some of the most used words in it, and based on that kind of get an idea of what are the main themes in the data. And I then write them down in a memo, because based on that memo, and that's a bit of a hidden function, you can create a list of codes. And so that is actually how you can do also, you approach it deductively. You have already a list of codes that you have thought about, you have in Word, you copy it into a memo, and then you use that function miscellaneous create codes from selected memo. And then you have the codes available, and then in that particular case I used auto-coding. Yeah, so I picked up on all the sentences, auto-coded all the current PDs, and then had the data pre-coded, which didn't mean I didn't have to go through it. And here again, based on these initial ideas, you see that structure coming up again. Yeah, so what are all the game-related codes? What are all the negative aspects? What has to do with the online stuff? What is educational? Some of the variables here also in the data, and the positive evaluation. Thanks. So the bone here, the NCT method, basically it's always the same. Whether it's deductive or inductive, there's kind of the structure that will help you to do your analysis in ATLAS. And again, this needs some further coding here. We have some big codes here that needs to pay, I need to pay attention to that, read to that, because the auto-coding, of course, can only pick up on words, and now I have to actually look at it and give it meaning and then develop my code list from there. And you see this is only the initial structure, and I'll show you a number of examples of how this initial structure within second and third and fourth cycles is changing until it's finally done. Yeah. So basically the mouse clicks are actually described in the book, where I just also focus on the various aspects of the model. We have been mainly talking about this first level of developing the coding system with the emphasis or the aim basically, or the purpose of then utilizing the analysis tools. So this is kind of the prerequisite to be able to use the analysis tool in an optimal way to run your analysis and come to the report. So thank you very much for listening, being part of that, and please also write down your feedback in the evaluation form, because we always work with that to improve our webinars and to offer you the best we can. So I say goodbye and wish you a nice day wherever you are in this world. Bye-bye.